Sobriety Essays number 59, Losing a Wife in Sobriety. Dorothy and I had been married for 51 years. The last anniversary was on October the 10th, 2015. On April 14th, 2016, Dorothy had just come home from a volunteers luncheon about 1 p.m. Her usual bouncy self, full of life, full of enthusiasm. I walked into the back office to get something. When I came out of the back of the house, Dorothy was sitting in her favorite chair, and there was something in her face that did not look right. Not distorted, but not right. I asked her, "Dorothea, how are you feeling?" She said, "Chuck, I don't feel good." I told her I was calling 911. She said, "Okay." That was the last thing she ever said to me. It says in the big book that we will know how to handle situations that would baffle us. Everything I did was in perfect order in the right sequence. I called 911. I called my daughter, who lives here in Laguna Woods. I called my sponsor, and I called my friend Jack, who lives just a couple of blocks away from me. The reason why I called Jack, I intuitively knew that I was in no condition to drive me to the hospital. 911 responded in less than 5 minutes. Several months later, I bought 2 large serving dishes with sandwiches and cookies and gave them to the people at the fire station. I could not talk. I was crying, but I did say thank you. It took about a half hour before the doctor had a chance to talk to me. He had done his examination. He told me that Dorothea had suffered an aneurysm to the head, and he told me and my daughter together to let her go. He said he could do a couple things, but the quality of life would be terrible. Let her go. I did not hesitate. I did not have to think about it. I knew it was the right thing to do, so I simply said, okay. My sponsor had barged into the ER without permission and was standing directly behind me when I made that decision. I turned and wrapped my arms around my friend and cried like a little kid. Dorothea was put in a room, and I turned her care over to hospice. My daughter stayed with her mom 24/7 for 5 days. I just could not linger there that much. Dorothea was in a coma for 5 days. I would visit several times a day. For some unknown reason, I went over one night at 1 a.m. in the morning and laid down on the hardwood floor and slept. Hospice had come along and put a blanket over me. She did not die that night. Dorothea died at 3:05 a.m. on April 19, 2016. I was celebrating 32 years of sobriety on that very day. I arrived at her bedside at 3:15 a.m. as I lived nearby. I held her hand. It was still warm. I kissed her on the forehead. I thanked her for being my wife for 51 years. I took off her wedding ring to give to my grandson as they were very close. I misplaced the next 2 hours, but I wanted to go to an AA meeting. I arrived at 5 a.m. in a parking lot and put a sign on the windshield that said, "Wake me, I need a meeting." At 6 in the morning, I was in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was not worried about drinking. I did not want to walk through what I was about to walk through by myself. So I really did have a support group to start with. The wonderful thing about AA is I did not have to walk through this alone. My grandson, 29 years old, did move in with me, so someone else is in the house. About 3 days after Dorothea died, I sat down at the dining room table and thought about my future. This may sound funny, but I wrote down 3 things to maintain my sanity. The single most important thing to me to do was to keep the house clean. Funny but true. The second most important thing was to get my hands around finances. I had lived on an allowance for 51 years. No clue to our financial investments or bank accounts. True, I have an idea we were in very good shape. Next thing I wrote down was how to cook. Still a failure at that, but I did eat healthy. Support. About a week later, I went to an ice cream after an AA meeting with a friend of mine, and a friend came up and joined us. And he said, "Chuck, you need to go to grief classes." He was serious, and I respected him, so I started to research for finding classes. First Saddleback Church holds bereavement classes, but the first class was not until August, and this was April. Don't know who recommended the grief class at Saddleback Hospital, but I found them, and those were the classes I went to for 14 months. I needed them until I did not need them anymore. Made some good friends. I sometimes think I took more to the classes than I got out of them because of my AA background, such as a problem shared is half a problem. FEAR stands for face everything and recover. Now, I did misplace 2 months of my life. Here and there I remember a few things, but I don't know for sure, that I was going to 2 AA meetings a day. Again, not worried about drinking. I just did not want to go through the grieving process all by myself. Things started to fall into place. So as not to make this too long, Dorothy and I love to travel. I mean, really travel. I wanted to see if I could travel by myself. I had never done that before. I did not know how I would feel on my own. So I tried going on a golf driving trip by myself. I had a friend in Tucson. Now, I made the trip, and I was very, very successful, and I had fun. But I discovered I did not like doing it by myself. I also did a golf package all the way to St. George, Utah. While I'm very proud of myself for doing it, again, I did not like doing it by myself. I did 2 major trips with a guy I met in the bereavement classes. Jim R., 86 years old and had been married for 64 years. His last 3 years of his marriage were tough. She was very sick. But he and I became friends, and we created 3 videos on YouTube called the Wandering Widowers Club. Doing something for someone else was important. Clothes. My daughter and I went through Dorothea's clothes about 2 weeks after she died. There was a women's shelter called Ashland House for abused women with drug and alcohol problems. We filled about 6 large trash bags with clothes. Now this is funny. My daughter and I carefully went through the pockets of her clothes. We came up with over $2,000 in cash. This is not uncommon for European women to hide money in their clothes. Several women in the grief classes were still hanging on to their husband's clothes after 2 years. I have been able to help 5 other alcoholics over the last few years into the grief and bereavement classes. I did not tell them to go to the bereavement classes, I took them. At about 14 months after Dorothea's death, I was sitting at the dining room table with 3 thoughts that were going through my head. 1, what would my wife want me to do? 2, what do I want me to do? And 3, what would I want my wife to do if the positions were reversed? The answer, of course, is get on with life.